What? It's fine.
Good morning. It is September 21st. We're here at the Franklin County Courthouse for the regular board meeting. All three commissioners are present, our administrator, clerk of the board. And at this time, I'm calling the meeting to order. And would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, with that, I'd like to do a little tidying up from our last meeting. I would like everybody to recognize the fact that there was a couple of motions that were passed last meeting.
Mr. Chairman, before we
first, excuse me,
forward.
Commissioner Peck, there is, I have
Chairman,
the floor. I'm clarifying last meeting. Would you please hold on a minute here?
Not on the agenda.
There was a motion that the board direct the PA and Mr. Bruner to withdraw the admission of fault and respond to the litigation by rejecting the assertions in the complaint. That was seconded, and it would pass with the majority vote, or 2-1 vote, excuse me. Then there was a move for the board direct the PA to fully support the position communicated today and defend its client, which is us, the consent of the board. That too had a second, and it passed 2-1. Then there was a motion to waive the attorney-client privilege of September 1 correspondence. That was seconded, and I want to clarify and make sure that everybody knows that there was a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you're out of
opposed.
order.
All opposed, say
Chairman's
nay.
out of order. You can't vote on a motion from a
The
previous.
motion was just made again, Commissioner Peck, in a meeting, and it is just passed.
Nor is it
So
on the
will
agenda.
you please feed the mic and vote, yay or nay?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the agenda as presented, recognizing no commissioner has the authority to approve the agenda items unilaterally.
The chairman has
separate from this
the
board.
authority.
No, you do
Yes,
not.
I do. And it has been done in previous meetings, Commissioner Peck.
You do not have that authority.
You don't
It's
have
been
the
done with
authority to
consent.
take over the meeting, Commissioner Peck. Would you please stand down? Are you going to vote?
I'm objecting to the motion.
The motion
It is
passes.
out of
The
order,
vote
and a vote is
passes
not
2-1.
appropriate.
Now we'll go into Commissioner Administrative updates. Mr. Johnson, please.
So I spent the last part of last week at the meeting of the county administrators that's held annually, where I work with my counterparts across the state and other counties. We talk about a number of issues that are common to virtually all counties in Washington. Right now, I spend a lot of time talking about ARPA and how counties are addressing those issues related to federal funding for COVID-related responses and other important matters. We spent some time discussing with the state auditor's office things that they're looking at in different audits, both accountability and financial audits across the state, and how the county can best address those issues. We spent some time with the risk pool, alarming increases in the cost of insurance and the claims against counties, so that we're going to have to do some additional analysis as we get ready for next year's budget, knowing there's going to be some impacts to our premiums that we pay to the risk pool in a number of different areas. A lot of effort in cyber crime right now going on. We have a pretty good defensive layer in our systems, and our IT staff is working literally 24/7 to make sure that we don't have a breach or some kind of a cyber attack, but we're always at risk for those kinds of things. But without getting into the details of that, that is a alarming increase across the country, not just unique to Washington or our counties, but government entities across the country are under increasing cyber attack from both foreign as well as domestic cyber terrorists. We did have a productive meeting though, and I feel like Franklin County's in a good position on our ARPA planning. We're not particularly behind or ahead of any other county. Everyone's kind of sharing information, and as their plans come together, it's a good sounding board to kind of find out what the other counties are doing so that we make sure that we're in compliance with the federal rules. The federal final rule has not been issued yet. We don't anticipate that it will be dramatically different from the interim rule, but there are some compliance issues that we have to be careful that we don't run into an audit situation or a situation where the county would have to pay back something for spending that money in error or not in compliance with that program. So that's most of what we've been working on the last week. I'll have some more information during administrative business request to update the board on redistricting commission and the salary commission. We'll cover that in a little while.
Commissioner Peck.
So I want to point out that shouting and bullying people does not in any way make a person's remarks accurate, lawful, or truthful. So I want to be on the record once again that I object to the chair's continued willful, knowing, and intentional refusal to comply with the lawful mandates of the Washington State Legislature, executed thereby and through the power granted to the Washington governor. Further, that any penalties imposed upon Franklin County resulting from the chair's unlawful actions are the personal responsibility of the chair, not to be paid, levied, or in any way become a burden upon the citizens of Franklin County. And then secondly, note for the record that, sir, I believe you have created a chilled work environment in this county and in this courthouse. Thank you.
That was a great update. Thank you for all the things you attended. Commissioner Mullen.
My list is about double yours.
Commissioner
so-
Peck, you're out of order. I already called for Commissioner Mullen. Will you please stand down, Commissioner
Like I
Mullen?
said a
please?
minute ago, volume doesn't make one right.
It doesn't. And interrupting all the time doesn't either, Commissioner Peck. So please refrain from interrupting the
I
meeting.
wasn't finished.
Commissioner Mullen, please.
So, Commissioner Peck, were you finished with your updates or?
Actually, no, I wasn't. Thank you for the courtesy. I attended a lot of the normal meetings with Board of Health and with Council of Governments that you hear reported each week, but of note this week I did an in-briefing with the Hanford Area Economic Investment Fund or Trust, which is funded through tipping fees or fees paid for dumping items in the low activity waste out of Hanford. The law allowing that was passed in 1991. The board was put in place in 97. I was appointed by the Director of Commerce for the state last week. And it was a good in-brief, and there's an opportunity for Franklin County businesses and municipalities, cities and counties to receive funds either at low cost or in some cases very, very low interest rates to help us do infrastructure that is badly needed. And I'd note that those funds can also be used to match federal and state funds for local city and county projects. But again, it's also available to citizens, especially small businesses that can create or protect existing jobs. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen.
So I attended the Benton Franklin health meeting, same as probably the other two commissioners as well. Also partook of the Benton Franklin Health Department exit audit, and everything there was brought into compliance. There was only one item that they found that was not in compliance, but it has been corrected. Also, I tried to attend the State Emergency Response Commission, but the audio was unaudible, so I couldn't hear anything that was taking place, and I don't know what the issue was there. I know they were remotely up at basically I think Airway Heights is where they had the conference, but like again the audio was so bad I couldn't hear it. So that concludes my report for this week.
Thank you, Commissioner Mullen. I attended the budget meeting here in Franklin County, and Very good news all the way across the board, except for the planning and building. Although they are making progress, they are still heavily, as the color chart says, that you can't get any darker than that. We have problems, Keith, and I've asked you numerous times to do an evaluation of this department, and you refuse to. We need to find out how we're going to make this department more effective and efficient for Franklin County. This department, with the growth in Franklin County, should not be that color. With the amount of funds that are coming in, this department is not working for the betterment of the county. So please, I'm asking to do an evaluation of that department and the personnel there within. Second, the law library. Another good meeting, although they're worried about their funding, again, with the COVID lockdowns. They were talking about opening up 2 law libraries, one here in the courthouse, one at CBC. I made the suggestion that they're close enough in proximity. We don't need 2 law libraries, just the one. Then I got numerous emails from people, and they basically all said the same thing. Dear Mr. Didier, as your constituent, I demand that you publicly oppose any attempts by the federal, state, and local governments to either promote or impose Fauci's lockdowns on school closures in America. No more lockdowns, period. Numerous of those, plus emails of this one, Keith, that I received that says, I sent this letter to Keith Johnson to be read tomorrow. This was dated August 30th. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for reading my emails out loud at the meetings. I want to applaud and support Commissioner Didier on his courageous stand against the mask mandates. It is the job of our elected officials to stand against unjust laws. Even if you interpret the governor's inly as lawful power to issue mandates based on the Emergency Powers Bill, any law that violates the Constitution is null and void. And since the executive branch does not make laws, all mandates are thereby not law. It is common to assume the checks and balances are only found within the branches of government, noting a clear example of the governor's vetoing a passed bill, which checks the legislature. However, all listening must be reminded that the levels of government check each other. In this case, the county is checking the state. We're given our rights by God, and his word is clear, that we are to stand against unjust laws. It is our duty as Americans, and especially the followers of Christ. The mask and COVID injection mandates are the most clear examples of unjust rules, second only to allowing Planned Parenthood to operate in Franklin County. I also applaud the Sheriff Raymond for not enforcing these mandates. It is only when we stand in the gap will we have revival in this country, county and country. At no point in history has appeasement ever worked against tyranny. Stand strong. It will get harder. Next, I had a phone call yesterday from a gal that has somebody that was moved to the Yakima Hospital. They're following the protocols of ventilators and these medicines that are actually killing people in the hospitals. And she is beside herself because this is her fiance and he is dying, and they are not going to go with the better judgment of the medical team that has put together this. I can't remember the name of it, but they put together what El Salvador has just sent to every resident in their country. Ivermectin, aspirin. These are the things that are working against this. And El Salvador has sent it to every living resident in their country, free, in case they catch it. I think we need to start looking at what really is working and what is not. That's pretty much for my presentation. So the next order of business is the certification of appreciation for Kelly O'Connor. Is Kelly here?
No, he wasn't able to come. I'm here to represent Public Works, and I'll make sure he receives the certificate.
Okay. Well, I know Kelly. He was also part of the Cattlemen's for a lot of years. On behalf of Franklin County, I'd like to express our gratitude for your faithful service as a Franklin County lead technician from May 30th, 1995 through September 1st, 2021. Your contributions to the county and for years of service have been invaluable. Please accept this certificate of appreciation for your dedication and professionalism. We hope you just know how much we respect and have valued you as a colleague. You will be missed at Franklin County. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor, for your service. Any other commissioners would like to say something?
I would just like to say thank you for the 26 years of service. It's much appreciated, and that shows quite a commitment to Franklin County, and we do appreciate your time and service here. Thank you.
And I'll just add that Public Works and Planning are obviously difficult places to work with a lot of criticism and a lot of pressure. And to stay for 26 years and serve the people is commendable. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we have a compensation change for the clerk finance manager position presented by Human Service Director Carly Knight.
Good morning, Commissioners. This request before you today, as indicated in the read ahead, is the culmination of some work we've been doing with the clerk's office over the past year as a result of some position changes the board approved last year, most specifically the elimination of a lead position, which enhanced the leadership duties included in the clerk's financial manager position. So the results of that evaluation were included in the read ahead, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Mr. Killian's here as well, if you have any questions for him.
Questions?
I have no questions for Michael.
No questions.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I make the motion that we approve resolution 2021-203.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
All right. Okay, with that, we'll move down to public comment. If there's anybody with public comment, Keith, anybody on the phone?
I do have one caller on the phone, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. Good morning, Jeffrey.
Good morning. Am I on?
You are. 3 minutes, please.
All right. Thank you. First of all, that was incredibly inappropriate for one of the commissioners to say that the medicines that are being used to treat COVID are killing people. You have no proof. That puts us at liability. Don't do it again. Second of all, if 2 of our commissioners are going to claim that they were not properly vetted by legal counsel in relation to the redistricting lawsuit, they need to provide us with proof. That is a serious allegation that can have professional and possibly even legal ramifications. I expect proof as a citizen of the county. You say you were not fully informed. Show me where you were not fully informed. Thank you. That is what I have to say. Also, the behavior of this commission is out of control. Civility is gone. The last meeting was embarrassing to the county. To have that much screaming and shouting to the point where the microphones couldn't even handle it was disgusting and disgraceful. Get better or resign. Thank you.
Anybody else for public
The
comment?
only caller that I had.
Okay, so first of all, if anyone is fearful of me not wearing a mask, first you need to go read the law that gives the governor the emergency powers. And in the second section, it gives all the powers which I believe are unconstitutional. However, it does give an unless. And the unless is if it interferes with a citizen's First Amendment right to protest, to go to their government for religious freedom. If you don't believe me, go read it and then read the First Amendment. So that being said, I've witnessed Commissioner Peck yelling all the time. I just want to point that out. So first of all, I'm going to go over the timeline because I've been going to these meetings for a while, and it was me that was pushing for the Redistricting Commission in the first place. So from what I've investigated this week as a private citizen, of Franklin County, Commissioner Mullins and Didier were not informed about the postponement of the redistricting commission. They voted for that, and there was no vote to postpone it. So who had the authority to call that? I have an email from one of the gentlemen, Lupe Cardenas, who was on the redistricting commission. And on June 15th, he was sent an email telling him that they would be meeting on June 21st. Later that day, he received another email, and this is from Administrator Johnson's assistant, that it would be postponed. Commissioner Mullen and Commissioner Didier were not aware of that postponement at all. Why? So first of all, PA Sant says that he gave in an executive meeting the discussion of what the plan was. He didn't put it in writing. The commissioners didn't sign it, and then they didn't come out here and vote for it publicly, even though they, of course, can't publicly give details. They would have needed to vote for the plan, for the strategy, and that was not done. Sant then sends them an email saying, if I don't hear from you, then I'm going forward with my plan. Okay, again, that's untoward. That's not how things are done legally. You actually have to have your client affirm that this is the plan that they're going to do. That was never done. So let's go back to April in 2018. There was people that said that Commissioner Didier was carrying around 3 maps. In April of 2018, which after January 16th, so first of all, the laws state that you cannot redistrict in an even election year after January 16th. So this is after January 16th. April 2018, Commissioner Peck tries to call for a redistricting, but Commissioner Miller is not attending, so the vote can't go forward. Even if it had, whoever was running that year could have sued the county, because you can't do that in an even year. Then I look through all the meeting minutes through 2019. There's not once that Commissioner Peck calls for a redistricting, the year that it could have been redrawn. Then comes 2020. Again, after January 16th, he has some people from the East Pasco come in, and they demand that the maps, that they choose from one of the maps that Commissioner Peck has in his briefcase. Is it time? Okay. So
We
what
do
I'm
have
saying,
another 3-minute period that you can conclude on.
okay,
at the
I
end of the meeting.
just want to say this. I am calling for our commissioners to please have an outside investigator come in and investigate this, because it was all done unprofessionally. And if it was, I will file a complaint with the Washington State Bar Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
I'm going to leave my mask on because last night I spoke at the city council, and everybody there wears the mask, and they're on video zooming in instead of holding a meeting like this, because they are respecting the mandates of the power of the governor that was given to him by the elected officials that gave him 99% of the vote and given him the power to make the decisions and to protect the citizens of this community. Let me just say that I don't know, I think I've interviewed all 3 of you at one time or another as a journalist, and all 3 of you had told me you're Christians.
Yes, I am.
I too am a Christian. I don't know what God you pray to, Mr. Didier, but a God that I know is humble, is not a bully. He doesn't break RCWs. The Christ that I know and that I pray to is a man that has respect and cares and loves his children and treats his fellow men as men and women that they should be treated. I would appreciate that. That's the same thing I would see in this organization here, or this commission. I'm not here to support or not give support to the Latino asking or suing the county, which they won. The commission that was formed by you three went out and found Republican Latinos to be on the commission. They haven't even met. They haven't even been able to give their point. It's not gonna matter. The job has been done. You can fight it, Mr. Mullen, you can fight it. Final word's gonna be the judge, just like in Yakima. Yakima, they just lost theirs, the county commissioners. And they're already accepting maps, and they're already getting ready to move forward with the next election. The city of Yakima, which I was part of when the Latinos sued the city of Yakima. $3 million later, because they wanted to stay in power. They lost, and they disrespected the judge. So the judge threw everything out and said, this is what we're going to do. He had the final say. That's going to happen here in this commission too. You will not have the final say, Mr. Didier, as you bully yourself here in this meeting, yelling and screaming and yelling at your fellow commissioners. That's not professional. We're not in a football game. We're in a professional meeting, and we need to act that way. Your prosecuting attorney, I know him personally. He's an honest man, and he doesn't deserve the attacks and the public attacks that you are putting on him. That could cause a big harm to his family. It could be a big harm to him personally, and it's not welcome by everyone that you think it's welcome. And I think you owe him a big apology, along with Mr. Mullen, that you guys are going to contest what's going to happen with these maps. You guys are going to contest it. It's going to cost us a lot of money. And I hope it doesn't get to $3 million like the city of Yakima did. And I hope your constituents see this, that you're using your position to try to make a point about the Constitution. This is not the place for that.
Thank you very much.
This is the business of the people.
Thank you.
This is not the Constitution.
Mr. Chairman, you gave Ms. Hatch much more time.
I told Ms. Hatch the same thing. There is 3 minutes at the end. You can conclude.
Exactly, yeah, and so.
Please.
You
thank
gave Ms. Hatch
appreciate that.
4.5 minutes.
Thank you, I appreciate
He says
that.
3 minutes.
No, I was watching, yes, and I was watching her
Okay.
time too.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Peck,
thank you,
for
Mr.
keeping
Peck.
track. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Peck.
So I appreciate that, you know, I watch and see and write as the National Latino Press Association president. I'm president of all the Latino press. And as you can see, and what my mission is to get more Latinos involved in the press. Every national news organization now has Latino anchors, Latinos reporters, locally, NBC, ABC, CBS, Latinos, weather people. From my work that I do across the land, traveling across the land, we're going to continue to report the facts and the truth that are happening in these rooms like this one
Thank you.
because of people running meetings illegally without wearing a mask. And I'm asking you, Mr. Didier, have you shown the county administrator your proof or your doctor's document that you are not?
I haven't asked for it. It's right down my desk. I got it.
Well, I think you need to ask for that.
Would you like to see it? Maybe I can
I
get a
would like
copy
to
of
see
you
it.
and you can put it in your
I
paper.
would love to have a copy of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to have a copy.
Thank you. And let me ask you this. Are
Yes, sir.
all Latinos Democrats?
No,
Is there a mix between Republican and Democrat?
I think they choose who they want to be and who
There
they
you
want to be.
go.
Yeah.
So why do you think that this whole thing's all about we're against Latino? We're not. My son-in-law is
I didn't say you
Latino.
were- I didn't say you were against Latino.
I want him to represent me. I'm asking James Jimenez to run for my position.
Mr. Didier, I didn't say the commissioners are against Latinos. I didn't say that.
Sure sounds like it.
Don't misconstrue my
Well,
words.
don't misconstrue my words,
Well,
sir.
I've seen you in action.
Oh, I've seen you in action. Thank you very
I'll
much.
finish
That's
it.
4.5 minutes.
I'll
Thank
finish-
you
I'll
very
finish at
much.
the end of 3
I
minutes.
appreciate your time at the mic. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else for public comment? Okay, with seeing none, then we will continue on here. All right, I think we're down to the approval of business, the vouchers.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $693.06 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,015,298.81 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Takes us to the consent agenda, and I believe there are 6 items on the consent agenda.
Move to approve consent agenda items 1 through 6 as presented.
Been a motion and a second. I would like discussions on 2 and 3. So with that being said, on items 2, this is cancellation of unclaimed warrants, okay? As I looked through this and I started going through the names of the unclaimed warrants, on the second page, we have Tri-County Fire Association listed 4 times for $500 each. What is the explanation on this? Why is the Tri-County Fire Association have unclaimed warrants? It's $2,000 there for the Tri-City Fire Association.
You asking me that question?
I'm asking anybody that, but what is
They
this?
they have not responded to requests to cash those warrants. So this is kind of what happens after those warrants were issued in 2018 and 2019.
2 of them were listed as 1/14/2019, the same day, 2 different times.
Right.
Are these repeats or are these?
No, those would have been separate warrants.
Sometimes organizations go out of existence. It's complicated for them to receive money. If, for example, you were a not-for-profit and you close down, it's probably less trouble not to accept the warrant, leave the money with the county. Just a guess, but that's an example of how that can happen.
Are they out of business?
I don't know if they are. I can look into that particular one, but
Yeah, because I would like to, if they're a fire association, I would like to see them get their funds back. Next on item 3 is contract amendment 1 between Franklin County and MP Construction, and this is on a door down for the assessor's office of $4,816. And I'm just curious as to why the expense of $4,816 for a door.
yeah, because it's a custom build for that particular door. It is not cheap to do custom doors, and in a location that required more extensive construction. Jen Wagner's here. She can speak
Yeah,
to the
Jen, could
specifics
you
of the
please answer
construction,
that?
but there was an additional window that was required, and the door itself needs to be consistent with the other architectural pieces of the county court.
But this is just a door, not a window also. This is just a door?
It is just a door. Initially, it was made as a pass-through, and then it was asked to change by the assessor. So now with the pass-through frame, we have to have another frame that is consistent with the door. It's a little bit wider than a regular door. Everything's just about custom on there. The oak doors that we have throughout the courthouse, we want to stay consistent with that. We also want to stay consistent with the hardware that is throughout the building. And a portion of it is freight, and that's a very little portion, but a portion of that is freight coming from California.
So you're going to downsize the opening to the size of a doorway?
It is going to, it's a little bit wider than a regular door, but it's going to have to be downsized, because if you go through there in the office and look at the size of the thresholds that's made cutting in the concrete, it is not a normal size door.
Okay. Those are my questions, so thank you. We got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. We're down to administration office business. Keith.
The first update, these were the requests of the chairman to provide some update on the redistricting committee. And I just want to be careful here to recognize that because our redistricting effort is subject to litigation, I'm in an awkward position I'm aware that the board voted to waive attorney-client privilege, but I don't feel like I can do that. Based on the advice of counsel in some of our executive sessions that have taken place since the Redistricting Commission was first authorized in May, those meetings were postponed pending the outcome of some of these litigation decisions. Because intervening circumstances from a legal standpoint took place, that was the reason that these meetings have not yet taken place, is because we didn't have census data until the middle of August, and that has been under review by our legal counsel and our demographer. And I think we're probably at a point now where we could conduct a meeting that would be informative and productive. But I know there's also another executive session today to discuss with legal counsel kind of the current status of our litigation. So I recognize that the original intent of the redistricting committee has been challenged. It has been a difficult process, but I think we've done everything we can to move this forward. The other item was an update on the Franklin County Salary Commission to review and approve elected officials' salaries. We have recruited 3 times now members from the public, and we have not had a response on our 4 professional positions that are on the commission. The ordinance that was adopted requires that all 10 positions be appointed prior to convening the commission, and short of a personal outreach of myself or Carly going to our professional colleagues and personally recruiting them, it has been, we've had a non-responsive public to seek out those positions on that committee. And my feeling is if I were to go out and personally recruit people, that would defeat the purpose of being objective in terms of elected official salaries. So I have not done that and don't advise the commission that that's an appropriate path forward. We have kept the advertisement up on our website. We have sent it out to professional organizations in the legal and human resources groups locally. But until we get applicants for those positions, we do not have a seated number of 10 positions on the commission. So that is a challenge that we're still working through, but don't have final resolution yet. That's really just, other than that, I think that's all I have for administration office business right now.
So question, Keith, on the redistricting committee, are they going to be following the guidance of the court, or how are they going to now, with all this confusion and what's going on in this courthouse, how are they going to decipher what are they going to follow in means of drawing maps?
Any plan that the redistricting committee develops or supports, and I would expect that they would have maybe more than one proposal, but let's assume they have 2, 3, at least more than one proposal, then this board would have to approve them, and then they would be subject to the approval of the judge in the litigation. Whatever we come up with has to be approved by the judge.
Keith, and Chairman Didier, I think I could respond a little bit and give some clarity of direction. Early on, I believe this board had made a request to wait for the census data because that was kind of the gold mark, so to speak, of the best, most available evidence. At least when we knew it was coming or going to be forthcoming, that is the evidence that our demographer focused on as soon as he received it and was able to put that evaluation together. this board, when it created the redistricting committee, it basically identified who would be on that committee. The next step, though, for the board is now that we do have the census data, we know what we need to do. Once the lawsuit was filed, that kind of puts a lot of question out there. The board needs to now have a discussion as to what they want from the redistricting committee. The plaintiffs from the other side, my understanding is they probably have a couple proposals of maps. The suggestion would probably be to consider or have the redistricting committee consider the plaintiff's proposal and have that discussion. The other discussion would be, or direction that the board could consider, is having a couple different locations within the county. I think even the plaintiffs had suggested that as part of their suit was to want to ensure that they're gathering public information as well. So I think offhand, Pasco, Mesa, and Connell are kind of the three main areas that I think gives our residents a good location for having those local meetings. So I think one of the discussions that we'd like to have with our council today with the board, preferably an exec session first, and then I anticipated there'd probably be a need for discussion outside of exec session to discuss the path forward. The board will need to give direction because right now the redistricting committee does not have authority to convene on their own, and they have not been given the direction from the board as far as what the board would like them to do. So for instance, what we can do, working with the county's council, with Peter Morrison, and taking all that now known demographic data, knowing what we need to do to be in compliance, we could have them come either to the redistricting committee and provide what kind of parameters they need to look at, provide maps of where the existing precincts are, because I think when the plaintiffs in their suit, they put forward a map, they didn't draw that map or propose it consistent with precinct boundaries in mind. So I think we have a good opportunity now as the county to take the resources that we have available with our existing precinct areas, be able to figure out what gets us to a legal proposal, and we could have different variants. I think what has concerned some people is the paper picked up on one map proposal. There has been no agreement in the court yet. Where we are with litigation right now is the court has asked the parties to either consult, have some public discussion, be able to gather input. The county will either work with the other side with what we want to see, as Franklin County wants to see for redistricting maps. And then the other side could either say, okay, we like that. Maybe we need to tweak this out a little bit. If the parties can resolve that, that's great. But if not, the court has asked that both sides submit their own version or proposed redistricting maps by November 8th. And then on November 15th, that is when there is a current hearing. Whether that hearing actually takes place on that day where the court would hear then from both sides and we make our best arguments, or whether or not it might be set to a slightly later date for further evaluation. But that's where we are. So what we really would need from the board at this point in time would be a resolution that gives specific guidance to the redistricting committee so they know what they are tasked with, whether the board wants to give them just simply the precinct map with where the existing boundaries are. We can also provide legal guidance as to what we need to constitute a legal district as far as achieving what the court is going to look at, whether or not you could achieve that Latino majority district. That does not isolate the county nor the plaintiffs to any one particular type of map. That gives the county, as well as the citizens of our county, a lot of opportunities to weigh in and explain, do they want to have a vertical line through the North County? Do they want a horizontal line just north of Pasco? But what we have to do, though, is we have to comply with the law. And that's why it would be helpful for the redistricting committee to understand the guidance that they need going into that meeting so that they know what their objectives are. They have to try to apportion the county residents so that we have basically a third of our population within each one of those districts. Because of that, there's going to be, some slight variations in options. But one of the suggestions that we would at least make is we could work with our demographer who has the best information and data, provide that data and information to the redistricting committee so they know where is the population, what precincts are deemed to be the Latino majority precincts so that a majority can be achieved through moving different maps around or different precinct boundaries. Ideally, it would be nice to be able to do this without changing any precinct boundaries, just simply moving certain precincts into a particular district map. That would make it a lot easier for staffing and the auditor's office in trying to prepare for upcoming election. But that's where we're at, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sant, may I
Yes.
ask you a question?
Yes.
So out of the summary judgment, the
Yes.
one thing that was ruled on is that we're going to be district only, primary and general, correct?
The one thing that was ruled on is that there was a violation of the Voter Rights Act.
And we're going to have district only, primary and general,
That's
correct?
That's correct.
That's right. Just want to make it clear that there is a adamant push for personal gain for district only, primary and general.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because one of the things that we've looked at as well is what Yakima, it was referenced what Yakima has been going through, but also our own city of Pasco. In the city of Pasco, because they have more districts, they were able to also create one of those districts as an at-large position. We really can't do that with our county, because necessarily what you would do is you would have then two equally sized remaining commissioner districts and then the one at large. And so that would not be able to achieve the objectives that the court has handed out. But we have that ability to be able to present to the court what the county's position would be by November 8th, and either work with the other side to get their consensus, or we make our best arguments. And that's where we've explained that's going to be some of the best arguments that we have going forward, is getting that public input. We would need to move on that, but what we really need first is that clear direction of how the board would like that redistricting committee. Because right now they've been formed. That's the authority that has been granted. They've been granted authority to form. They have done that. I believe all of the positions, Mr. Johnson, I believe all the positions have been filled on that committee, or are there some vacancies?
Actually, we have not received a affirmative response from the Hispanic Chamber, as they are endorsing the litigation against the county.
Okay. So have they said that they're abstaining then from sending somebody?
No, they haven't given us a firm answer on whether they would appoint a position.
So I guess that raises another point that we could come back to, because again, we didn't contemplate a lot of the scenarios that could arise. So I guess what the board would want to do is create some rules as to, does this board want a majority vote coming out of that redistricting committee? Does the board want to have the parties have a unanimous presentation to the board, either with one version of maps, or would they like to give the board a couple choices? Would they like to present to the board, hey, these are our top two maps from gathering that citizen input? So those are all issues that the board should consider. And I would suggest that what we do is, once the board has that discussion, we could consolidate that to a resolution so it's clear. So that way the board has now given authorization to the redistricting committee of what the parameters are, and that we can help schedule and coordinate those public meetings to occur within a short time. Mr. Chairman, is there any other questions with that, or?
Just the fact that you brought up the Pasco City Council. Are you aware of the participation in these districts now? Is it important for the participation of the voters to have a say in this? Because we have 3 city council positions that were won with between 250 and 300 votes, when Saul Martinez won with 1,750 votes. Are we really getting a good reflection of our community and participation when they are being, I should say, not actively participated with the voters? There isn't as many voters in these precincts because they're not registered to vote.
So, and that's the challenge, frankly, for everybody. I mean, trying to get people to come out and vote. I mean, I'm astonished, frankly, every time I look at the election results, we're seeing sometimes voter turnout at 30%, 38% sometimes of these mid-year
But these
elections.
precincts don't have that kind of
But the question.
population of voters.
So just to go back, one of the things that we look at is not just the population of the precincts, but who are the eligible voters? In other words, individuals that are over the age of 18 are presumed that they are capable of being able to participate in the election process. I have heard from some people that say, look, I'm not voting in this election because I don't want my vote to be lost, or that's their free exercise of their vote. And sometimes people choose to vote by not voting. People choose to show their support by abstaining from certain results. And so one of the things that I think is what we need to look at, though, is just looking at the demographic data, because that's what the court is going to review. They're going to see, look, if this is a high percentage of Latino voter population within that precinct, it doesn't know how exactly those individuals will vote. But what they can do is they could extrapolate the data from those 90+% precincts and see if those individuals vote for candidate A, and then in other precincts where maybe the population is 90% Caucasian, if they vote for candidate B, that's what the court is going to use to analyze whether or not there's polarized voting. And that's what the experts in our case have reviewed. We have waited until the census data came out. We were able to get our expert to put that together because this is the expert, one of the top people in the country that gathers this information together. And when we have our expert look at the data and crunch the numbers specifically by precinct to figure out, is the court going to find that there's a violation? And I wanted to be clear too, I think it was shared last meeting that somehow there was accusations of this board or our county being racist. That is not what this lawsuit is at all. What it is it's about changing demographics. And that's why the census is important, to make sure that we're in compliance now with the Washington Voter Rights Act. And so anyway, that's what this expert did, is he analyzed the data, and we challenged some of the information that was presented from the plaintiff side. But when we looked at it from the legal standards of what we would have to achieve going to court, we figured out that there is in fact polarized voting. That does not say anything about the racist intent. What it shows that we have a significant voting block of citizens within our jurisdiction that are not able to constitute a majority within one of those districts and be able to have a voice. And I recognize not every election is perfect, but that's what our expert did, is he overlapped the census data with the 2020.
You use the term
election
voter
results.
population.
Yes.
In these 3 city council districts, it's not voter population. It
It's
is
total.
population only,
that's
not
correct.
voter
That's
population.
correct.
So don't confuse the two. We got to use the facts. The facts are population, and they're not registered to vote, Sean.
Well, I recognize that. And what I'm saying is that we are looking at both voters as well as population as we're trying to look at this data. And so
Thank you.
I think that's just important. I wanted to give that little bit of background because that's going to be helpful for the board to determine what would you like the redistricting committee to do. We should pass that by resolution so that it's very clear that this is the authority that the board is authorizing that committee to do. And we're glad to help with that. And I'm hoping we could have a little bit of time in executive session, talk about some things, and then I would anticipate we would come out for further discussion on redistricting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. We keep referencing back to Yakima and comparing ourselves to them. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that anybody that has ran for office and won the primary did not win the general. And I think the case is opposite in Yakima. But in Franklin County, to my knowledge, the person that wins the primary goes on to win the general in almost every case that I'm aware of. And to say that, countywide voting is not representative, I disagree, because I know in my case, I won the primary. I won the general. And I don't know of any case where anyone has won the primary and not won the general. The numbers are almost consistent.
Race.
Pardon me?
My first race, I lost the primary and won the general.
How many years ago was that?
Well, that's an excellent observation. That was in the 2008 race with the district, or the term starting in 2009. And each of us could analyze what the shift in population may have changed that one way or another, but I just offered it. It has happened, but I agree,
Well,
it's not common.
It's not common. And in the primary that you lost, you ran against one of the longest running county commissioners in state history as the incumbent.
True.
So that would be very difficult to beat that person in the primary.
Right. And I think you raise a good point, because incumbency does play into these races clearly. There's no question that it does. I think what I'm seeing is that the obligation or necessity or requirement or whatever you want to call it to go to district-only voting is not up to us. It's going to be up to the court, because we didn't address this ourselves a few years ago when we could. We allowed it to end up in court, and now the court is deciding. And Mr. Sant, if there's anything in that analysis that is incorrect, please correct me. I want to be accurate.
There are different times that you can address redistricting and adjust that. And I don't know necessarily, because going back, trying to figure out if adjusting the district where it did not account for the ability of that district to choose their candidate, but then to still be able to be defeated at the overall election, that's the question. And that was the benefit of having both the census data as well as the 2020, because they say that our presidential races, I think everybody recognizes there's a lot more voter turnout during presidential years. And so looking at now with the census data hand in hand with the 2020 elections, that is going to be the best layer. And so what our demographer did is took the population for those precincts, figured out what is the trend line of those precincts, and they could identify based on ethnicity and other factors how, if the population is 90% one particular race or group in a particular precinct, they could then use the data for how did that precinct vote. If that precinct votes 70% in one direction for candidate A, but then in other precincts it's completely different, then the court will look at that and figure out what is causing, where's that polarization from? Is it from other factors, or is it simply based on race issues? Is there a protected class that is clearly seeing a contrast in how, at least by population, how they voted within that precinct compared to other precincts? And that's
So
really
I'm confused, Sean. You're bringing race back into it, and you said it wasn't about race. Now you're bringing race into this, and you said it wasn't about race. So let me ask you a question. If we go to district only, incumbency will be almost a guarantee of being reelected, correct?
I don't know that you could say it's a guarantee.
Well,
Incumbency-
Commissioner Peck just said that.
Incumbency is never a guarantee. I
Well,
think everybody
incumbency in a district only will be a guarantee.
not
And
necessarily because
I'm in favor
yeah.
of the Latinos winning 2 of the 3 positions, not just 1.
But you see,
I want to see
Yeah.
a representation of the people of the county, not just a certain district, not just a district down in town that has all these big homes and big money.
Okay.
They'll be guaranteed a position on this Board of Commissioners for as long as they want to serve.
But that's just the problem. There is no guarantee. And in fact, the court actually specifically addresses the issue. There is no guarantee to any kind of position by anybody. But what they have to have is an equal opportunity that if they did vote as a block, that they could achieve a candidate of their choice. Candidate of choice does not address race. It just simply says that, hey, people need to have the ability to get their candidate of choice elected. And if they have that ability at a primary that is designated as district only, but then the rest of the county feels differently and they vote for a different candidate, that's what the court is looking at, as that group of voters has been deprived the ability to elect their candidate of choice. And we could go into more discussion
Yeah.
with our counsel to
I'm sure we will.
explain that.
The point I was trying to make
Yeah.
is that by comparing us to Yakima County, I believe there's been many instances in Yakima where the person won the primary and lost the general. That is not the case in Franklin County.
If I could clarify, Commissioner Mullen, when I said comparison, the issue was they were facing a similar challenge, that they were in violation of the Washington Voter Rights Act. It was based on the same idea or principle that that the population within one of their particular districts was unable to elect a candidate of their choice. In other words, it was being diluted with the at-large position. That apparently is the data that they reviewed. I did not crunch Yakima specific data. What I know is they were facing a similar legal challenge. They evaluated the census data just like we had to do. And when they looked at the census data with their own voter data and demographics within Yakima, they too had seen that there was a need to now reevaluate district boundaries based on the changing demographics that had happened since the last census.
And again, my
I
point,
just wanted to clarify that it wasn't a specific comparison. I recognize Yakima County has a lot of different issues that are not present here in Franklin County, but as to the allegation of a violation of Washington Voter Rights Act, that's what they settled. That's what they resolved. And by resolving that, that necessarily makes it go to a district-only vote.
I agree that there was violations in Yakima County, but I don't think that those reflect what's happening in Franklin County. To my knowledge, like I said, there's not been a candidate that has won the primary and lost the general, whereas in Yakima County, it has happened numerous times. And to compare us to that, I think is wrong, because we're not a racist county.
And I agree with that. And I think that was what was so important when we filed our briefing and summary judgment motion to the court, is we were clarifying that this county was following the legal precedent and the laws and the practices for decades. But when you had the changing demographic and the Washington Voter Rights Act that was drafted to be consistent with the Federal Voter Rights Act, but the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized that states have a lot of deference in deciding how their election processes will take place. A lot of authority is granted to various state legislatures. I think we've had discussion where cases from Arizona and other places have given us some insights as to what the Supreme Court is looking at as far as an evaluation with the Federal Voter Rights Act. Now that Washington has adopted its own intent to make sure that there's not a discriminatory practice, that people do have the opportunity to elect candidates of choice, and in situations where that is unable to occur for whatever reason, whether it's overt racism, and no one was ever suggesting in our filings that this was overt, it was just the changing demographic required us to now relook at it. And now that we're looking at it, we have certain legal parameters that we have to designate to make sure that when we do redistrict, we get into compliance with the Washington Voter Rights Act. And that's all it's trying to avoid. They're not alleging that there was any particular racist action from the system. They're simply making the allegation that for a group in a particular commissioner district was unable to elect a candidate of their choice.
So Sean, let me just add a couple of quick points here. I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Mullen, and I can understand the context that you're offering it. Perhaps the piece that isn't being discussed much is that the Voting Rights Act is about the ability of members of a protected class, which, by the way, doesn't have to be based on ethnicity. There are other protected classes besides your ethnic heritage. And in the case where you have someone who loses in the primary but wins in the general, or vice versa, it matters with respect to the law whether or not those candidates were members of a protected class. So if you have a member of a protected class who wins in the primary but loses in the general, then that creates a question under the law.
That's why I don't believe that's happened in Franklin County.
Well, and if you flip it around and you say you have a member of a protected class who loses in the primary but wins in the general, that would almost suggest evidence that there isn't polarized voting. And so I'm acknowledging what you're saying. I see the appearance of it. What the law does is it looks at the actual voting in recent elections and looks to see whether or not the members of a protected class vote as a group and vote in a way that is opposite of the outcome of the election. I don't know if that helps any, but I looked at the same dynamic that you're talking about. It took a little bit of looking at it to get that it's what it appears on its face really isn't as relevant under the law as whether or not there's polarized voting and a protected class is unsuccessful in electing people, whether they made it through the primary or not.
Well, in
Commissioner-
your particular case, where you lost the primary and it was primary only voting, then what's to keep them from going back and saying that your election was invalid because it went countywide when you clearly lost in the primary?
Commissioner Mullen, can I defer briefly to Casey? I mean, he's the expert. That's why we retained him to, and I think he could give a good explanation, not only for your question, but I think for just education on this issue. If I could give him just
Yes.
a brief moment.
Thank you, Commissioners, and I know we have an executive session later. There's a unique analysis with Franklin County that I believe answers your question about the primary general discrepancy. Apologies, thank you.
Maybe just get a little closer to that, Mike.
Yeah, so there's a unique aspect of the Franklin County voting system, which answers, I believe, the question you're asking of why hasn't somebody won the primary and then lost the general. And that is, it's important to remember that the allegations by the plaintiffs in this case, which is in the public record, is that there's a 2-level violation of the Voting Rights Act. First is that because we go from a primary to a general, should a protected class elect a candidate of their choice in a primary district, they would ultimately lose in the general. There's also a second allegation as part of the Voting Rights Act that the current commissioner districts do what's called cracking the Latino vote. And so when you take a Latino vote, which is a citizen voting age population in excess of 35% based on our data, then you put those members of the protected class in 3 different primaries, then they can't elect a member of their choice in the primary either, because none of the 3 primary districts are a majority citizen voting age population of 50% or more. So while there is racially polarized voting, which we've seen and was set out in the briefing, that's why you can have racially polarized voting without a primary victory and a general loss. It's because the allegations in this case is that there's a 2-level violation, and it's the cracking at the primary, which prevents these are the allegations, which prevents the election of a candidate of their choice at the primary level. And then even if they were able to get a candidate of their choice at the primary level, they would lose at the general because of the dilution that would then occur by moving into a general. Those are the allegations. And I understand the point of in Yakima, there were certain cases where in smaller districts, there'd be a Latino candidate and they would win the primary and then lose at the general. But because of the way the districts were drawn in that matter, that was something that could be done here because the 3 primary districts none of them are a majority Latino or majority Hispanic district, either by population or citizen voting age population. That's why there's not been, at least the allegation is, a win at the primary and a loss at the general. I hope that
So
helps.
you're telling me that the protected class is not the majority of the population in that district?
Correct. So I believe under the current, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but under the current commissioner districts, the highest commissioner district for citizen voting age population, Latino or Hispanic, is in the low to mid 40s. I don't have the specific number in front of me, but because they're not, and then the other 2 are in the upper to mid 20s. And so because they are spread out over 3 districts, it's a 2-level violation, which is what the plaintiffs have alleged.
So what you're telling me, Ian, is that the protective class, Latino, Hispanic, that are conservative, are not going to get their voice heard because you're going to make sure that the liberal side wins the election.
That's not what I'm saying at all, Commissioner.
That's exactly what you're saying.
That's not exact. It's nothing of what I said.
Well, then why are we having so many Hispanics stepping forward saying they don't want this? because we have a whole redistricting committee
Correct.
that are totally against this.
Okay. Then, and we can talk
And they're
about
the protected class. Right?
the member.
Aren't they the protected class that we're trying to make sure they get elected?
No.
And are we electing a party, or are we electing the will of the people of Franklin County with their ideals and principles intact?
Commissioner, the members of the Redistricting Commission are not a protected class.
Have you looked at the statistics of the redistricting committee?
No, but being a member of a redistricting committee is not a protected class.
No. I'm just asking if you've seen
And,
who's on the
and there's
redistricting.
been a lot of allegations of our protected classes and members of races always voting together. Absolutely not.
Okay.
But based on the demographics we've seen, it's polarized. It's never going to be perfectly polarized, nor is it ever going to be perfectly not polarized, because people are people and no group is ever going to vote the same way across the board.
So your
but-
protected class, are you saying they're not the majority of the people in that district? Or are you separating it out to only the registered voters?
We're not separating it to registered voters, but what we're separating it out to is citizen voting age population. Because what the law requires is an equal opportunity. It doesn't require.
And you're telling me that the voter age of the citizens in each district are not in the majority?
The citizen voting age population for Latinos or Hispanics does not constitute a majority in any of the 3 current commissioner districts.
I was unaware of that. I assumed that it was just the opposite.
No, I believe it, like I said, the highest percentage of a current commissioner district is in the mid to upper 40s.
Registered voters or general population?
Citizen voting age population. Because, again, it's equal opportunity. So it is not whether or not they are guaranteed to get a majority of voters, nor is it the ones that are registered. What if you're a citizen and you're of voting age, that's within the demographics we're discussing.
So now
If
you're
you
now you're
choose-
bringing in if you're a citizen. Yes. So now you're bringing in the fact that they have to be a citizen, is what it sounds like to me. And I don't believe that there's any standards put in place that are checking to make sure that everyone that votes is a citizen. I believe that there are non-citizens that are voting in the elections.
That if there's allegations of non-citizens voting, that's a completely different issue. Because
No, but I'm just saying, I mean, if you're going to take the population of a district, I think it's only fair that that the statistics are right.
well,
You can't separate out now and say, okay, now we're not going to count their votes because they're not a citizen, or they were allowed to vote being a non-citizen.
if they're not a citizen, they shouldn't vote.
Well, that's the law, but I don't know if that's being enforced.
And again, that would be a completely different analysis, because we're talking about all that's required under the law is equal opportunity to elect a candidate of the choice. For there to be an opportunity, you would have to be a citizen. If there's some allegation of voter fraud or non-citizens voting, that's completely irrelevant to the court's analysis. What the court's going to look at is citizen voting age population as to whether or not there's an equal opportunity to elect a candidate.
Okay,
And
we're going
that
to get in.
population is determined by the census?
That's determined by a number of demographic data. Under the Washington Voters' Rights Act of 2018, it specifically calls out census data of the most recent decennial census, but can include other sources. And we've looked at the 2020 Washington State Office of Financial Management data, as well as
Which was 11 bodies, different than the census
of the total count.
of the
Yes.
total count for the county.
And then we also looked at the 2015 through 2019 Census American Community Survey data for demographics as well. They all show similar trends. And then you compare those under the statute, under the 2018 Voting Rights Act, to prior elections. And the statute specifically says the elections prior to when a challenge or claim is filed. So in this case, the claim was filed in 2021. We had the most number of elections, the most recent elections, and it was prior to the claim filed in 2020, which the court's going to look at 2020 as being the most dispositive elections.
Okay, I think we're going to get into further discussion down the road. And I think we need to carry on with the meeting at this time right now. Now, on the meeting agenda, we have 3 public comment. Was there intended to be 3 or just 2? Because we usually have 2 per meeting.
Yes, the third public comment was at the request of the prosecuting attorney's office because we thought there would probably be some discussion after the executive session on this topic.
Okay, so there is supposed to be 3. Okay, so at this time, we are at our second public comment. Is there anybody on the phone?
No one on the phone.
Nobody on the phone. Is there anybody in the room that would like to come forth with public comment?
Let me just finish quickly because I have to take my wife to a doctor's appointment. I came in not as a journalist today, so I'm not publishing anything that was said or done today with me participating in a meeting. Our ethics are that if you participate in a meeting, you don't write about it. And so I'm not. And secondly, I came in as president of the Latin Business Association from downtown with nearly 100 members. We're a nonprofit organization, 501c3. We have our federal status. We have our state UBI number as a nonprofit status. We have our city license, and we are working closely with the DPDA downtown, and we have nearly 100 members, with most of them are downtown business owners. I was encouraged by some of the administration from the city of Pasco to give a phone call to Mr. Keith Johnson about the funds that you folks are receiving, about $17, $18 million that you have a pot of money that you're going to distribute out to the business owners and to different projects that Mr. Johnson is working on, and to get these funds out. We as a nonprofit organization would like to have an RFP so that we can be able to put our proposal in and help you disperse the funds that you have, so that we can help those that we know that are members of our organization, nearly 100 business owners, Latino business owners that we represent as their president. We work hard in the mission of making Pasco and Franklin County as a good place to do business in and a good place to live in. And we think that now that we know that the census has just came out and we are nearing being the majority in this county, and in 2012, the next 10 years and 12 years will be the #1 race in this county. So it's something we have to deal with, and something that we have to work as good neighbors and good friends and get along. I know all 3 of you. I like all 3 of you. And you're all good people. I haven't known Mr. Johnson, but what I know of him and what I've learned of him, he's a good man and a good educated man, and he's probably one of the best things that's happened to this county. And so I think that working together, we can get a lot more done. Separately, we won't get very much done. We'll be having hostile meetings and having big differences, and we don't get anything done, and we spin our wheels. But as the representative of these business owners in this county and the city, I think that we have, in the last 18, 19 months, the businesses have been suffering, and they need help. And we hope that Mr. Johnson is able to work through the numbers and give a good number of money back to some of these business owners that are needing money today. City of Pasco just about ready to start writing checks this week to the businesses that their first $9 million that they're going to be working on. And they just devoted last night to $2.7 million will be immediately dispersed out to the businesses. So I hope that the county does the same thing. No, we are not a racist county, nor the Hispanics are racist, nor the non-Hispanic community members are racist. We are not. We are neighbors, we are friends, and we need to get along and work together. And that's who I represent. And if I, as a member of my church and as a journalist, I try to hold the highest ethics that I can in representing my people and where I live and the people I work with. And I hope that I get the same respect from this county. Thank you.
Commissioners. My name is John Rose, member of the community. I live on Road 48. Actually, I'm one of the donut holes, so I guess I'm a county inner city guy, I guess. Thank you. Thank you. I just have two questions. The first one, the census that's been talked about from Brother Sand, DA Sand, and this other lawyer here. I'm curious to what the census consists of, meaning are these citizens or are these just bodies? If we're trying to literally allow everyone to vote, no matter if they're citizens of the country or not, that's an issue. So I would like to see that data. If they just went out and took a census, yeah, how many in this household, et cetera, what's the ages, versus can you show me you're a citizen of this country and can legally vote? I think that's important. Number two, we keep talking about underrepresentation. I don't know about you, but every time we vote for a governor, I feel pretty unrepresented. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the vote and you have the governor sitting there on top of the Space Needle saying, I see everyone I need to see to get elected. What are we after? What are we after? We're going to be underrepresented no matter what you do, and you're trying to make it as fair as possible. But I'm not really sure what you guys are trying to, or what the law is trying to accomplish here. If we're going to redistrict and gather up all of one protected class so they can be represented, okay, I mean, if that's the law, that's the law. But is that equal? Is it equal in the law? We can certainly use the word equity and whatever that means. I want an opportunity to vote and have my vote count. And I think every citizen wants that. But if we look at what's happening on the border today, let's just say the Haitians get to wind up in our community. There's only what 15, 16,000 of them right now. Let's just say we get them all bussed in right here. Let's put them in one district. We could play this game all day long. So again, those two questions. Are these citizens that we're dealing with, or just bodies? And as far as the outcome of this whole thing, I feel unrepresented, especially in the government of the state. And that's my comments for the day. Thank you.
Mr. Rose, thank you. I just want to respond quickly. You referenced what our objective was, and if it's to follow the law, and speaking for myself, it is specifically to follow the law. And I would just note that the law was given to us by the same legislature that elected the governor that I suspect you and I probably didn't vote for. So it's extremely important whom it is we elect and send to the legislature as well as the governor's mansion, because they give us these laws that we then take an oath to follow.
Thank you, Commissioner Peck. This is public comment. We're not supposed to respond. Is there any more public comment?
So maybe my phone doesn't show it as well, but I looked at the commission page here on Franklin County, and it asks for people for the Veterans Advisory Board and the Salary Commission, but I can't find anything about the Redistricting Commission. I also want to point out, and I'm glad to hear that the maps that we've all been given, which seem to only protect Commissioner Peck's district, are not the ones that we are going to be required to follow. Hopefully the Redistricting Commission will get a chance to actually do something. I will point out also that the reason why they were starting to meet in June wasn't just because we knew that the census data wouldn't come out till August, but was so that they could read up and study the laws as a group and discuss it. And the fact that they were postponed without a vote of the commission that voted for them is quite disturbing to me as a citizen. I also know that, as Commissioner Peck claims, that he worries about the law. When Commissioner Mullen did propose, make the motion for the commission, and it was voted and approved, it was out in the hall that he was cornered in an illegal meeting, and Commissioner Peck yelled and screamed at Commissioner Mullen for that vote, as witnesses have stated. So I just want to point out that we can pick and choose and pretend, but all of us know the truth. Also, I'd like to talk about, with a lot of this COVID money, I mentioned that we need to have ultraviolet lights because those are the scientific proof. I implore the gentleman is Stephen Petty. He lives in Dayton, Washington. He's one of the top in the nation. Used to work at PNNL, and I have the information on his YouTube video that he was explaining that. I also watched this thing about the vaccines and the VAERS reporting system, and I've put that on here where all of you can look at that. It's an over an hour video, but it's very, very good. And someone else that you should consider to consult before you force vaccines on the employees of this county. Also, there's a website that explains the 4 phases of trials that she actually refers to in her video, and talks about how they are normally supposed to be done and how they were done. It's usually a 10-year process on vaccines. The third phase of any trial, which includes usually is about 3,000 people, it's normally takes years. They did it in 6 months. And so this is showing, she reports of how many people have died and also have had issues. So I understand that's my time, and I just want to say, I again ask for an investigation because I think that the citizens have the right to know that there's not a separate group running this county than the ones that we see here and that we voted for. And I leave that with you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, before we move into executive session, I will, before the people disband, is there any other business for the good of the board, or for the good of the county, excuse me?
Yes, I would like to bring back up the 2019 COLA that was awarded to the elected officials. Looking through it, I was not, here when it happened. But I do believe that there were mistakes that were made, and I don't want to point out fingers at anyone, but I would like to make the motion to make sure that this matter is crystal clear. And I move that Franklin County Commission approve and accept the 2019 COLA for the elected officials as it has been paid to date. We no longer desire the PA to spend time on it, as this issue is considered settled with no further actions needed.
Is there a second? I'll second. There's been a motion and a second. Discussion.
On the one hand, I would be happy to accept the fact that it is arguably a de minimis amount, and that the cost of legal compliance could exceed the cost of the amount in question. I don't concede that. And if it were my own money and my own business, I might be inclined to concur. However, in this case, I do believe this is going to be a matter under review by the state auditors in the compliance audit. And based on their previous response, I'm quite certain that they will determine that it is unlawful and that we will simply end up being provided a management letter and directed to reverse it. I could certainly be wrong about that. If it were my money, I would probably let it go, but it's not my money, and I'm going to try to follow the law as best I can, and therefore I cannot support the motion.
Well, I believe that the board does have the right to make the decision, and I honestly don't believe it is worth the time and effort to proceed it any further. So,
All right, there's been a motion and a second. We've had discussion. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay?
Okay, with that, is there any other business for the good of the county before we go into executive session? All right, Keith, take us into the first executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We request an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, for potential litigation. Ask that members of the board, the clerk, myself, prosecuting attorney. Is that it on the first one, Sean? Or do you want outside counsel on the first one?
You want to take the first one that I think is much shorter?
Okay.
I think 5 minutes.
Okay, let's do that one. Thank you, Casey. Yes, and also our administrative assistant, Jennifer, stayed to,
Can you text me so I don't have this?
Yes.
out there?
thank you.
We only asked for 5 minutes, Carmen. We only asked for 5 minutes.
On this
But
one.
then there's another one, and then
Yeah,
there's mine.
yeah,
So-
yeah. So we are out of executive session, and Sean, if you'll guide us through a motion, we'll make a motion and we'll have a vote on this action.
Just to preface, before we get to the motion, what we are seeking is we are currently in litigation regarding one of the suppliers of opioids, and that is the Mallinckrodt company that is currently in a bankruptcy. The recommendation from our outside counsel that represents several counties has made the recommendation that we adopt the proposal to vote in favor of that proposal. That is a vote that is due for this Friday, and I could cast that vote on behalf of the county. So I would, at this time, ask the commissioners for authority to go ahead and authorize acknowledgement of that recommendation from our outside counsel and vote in favor of that settlement at this point in time.
So moved.
I concur.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, we'll move into the second executive session. Keith?
Yes, I'm requesting an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, potential litigation. Ask the members of the board, the clerk and administrative assistant, the prosecuting attorney, and outside counsel to be present.
I'd also ask for Jen Johnson just to be added to that list. I'm not sure if she's able
Jen, are
to.
you on the line still?
Just in case she is available, that she could join in for that. How much time did, I would ask for a half hour, up to a half hour with the right to come out earlier if
Okay.
Depending on the will of the board. So she acknowledged she is available. Does she have a number that she can call in?
Yeah, it's the regular
Okay.
number. But as soon as I hear the beep, I'll ask for her.
I can simply call her and put her on speaker here.
She's coming on. Jen, is that you?
Hi, this is Jen. I'm on the line.
All right, very good, thank you.
For up to a half hour?
Yes, for up to half an hour, officer coming out early.
And we will be coming out of executive session with another public comment for anybody that wants to stay in.
Oh, you are, Rita? Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh.
The public comment will be after this executive session.
Oh,
We got a half hour
this is an
executive.
executive
Yeah,
session.
we got one more
Oh my
executive
gosh,
session.
Sorry, I thought you go to another room for that. I believe.
How much time have we left?
Another 30 minutes.
Okay.
We've come out of executive session. We're going to extend an executive session for another 30 minutes.
Under the same
Under the same RCW and same staff.
Another 30.
All right, we've come out of executive session with no decisions being made. We have a public comment period, so if there's anybody that would like to come to the mic for public comment, or Keith, do we have anybody on the phone?
Nobody's on the phone.
Okay.
Imagine you are pretty tired sitting there as long as you have, and I certainly am too. I just want to make a couple of comments. I want to go back to COVID and just some questions I would throw out to you. I don't think that we're going to settle into debate between us as far as science, because first comment is this: science is never settled, yet we get from our, if you will, government, that it is somehow settled. Science is never settled. Otherwise, we'd still be living on a flat earth.
Right.
Heavens knows we wouldn't have an iPhone. I mean, just think about it. Science is never settled.
Right.
The second issue I would have you consider is censorship. It's one thing to have a different opinion. It's another to have it cut off from public discussion and or just research. If that is happening, which it is, I don't need to explain that to you, what does that tell you? If somebody were to shut your opinion off, is that discussion? I would have you think about that when you're thinking about these mandates that we're receiving. The last thing I would like to just tell you, and that is, I don't know what's happened to my body, my choice, my business. That really is the Constitution. And so for you to mandate something, anything really, for employment purposes, I would believe, and my thoughts are, probably about as anti-Constitution as you can get. And I thought that's what you were sworn to uphold. That was your oath. To protect me, to protect the citizens of our county, of our community, by upholding the Constitution of the United States. Freedom, liberty, justice. And that's all I have to say. And thank you for letting me say it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My comment is, first, I'd like to know where we can find the census data or the what the demographics show from your demographer. I would also I'd be interested to know if the 20% in the other two commissioner districts, if those are registered voters and known citizens, and how much that 20% is compared to really, I believe it's almost only 10% in that one district of Latino voters that are registered to vote. And that implies that maybe they aren't citizens. I hope that they're not going to be pushing non-citizens to get registered to vote, because if they do, when they decide to go get their citizenship, they will be denied it because they've broken the law. And that's really harming them. The other thing is that one of the commenters here was stating, well, you went and got Republican Latinos. Well, what does their political affiliation have to do with anything? They're still Latino. And as far as I know Lupe, he came from Mexico. He's a self-made man. And I have no idea what it is, if he's a Republican or a Democrat. I don't know. We don't register to vote under our political affiliation anymore. So I don't know. But I just know he's a good and intelligent man and one of the people that lives in my district. And I just want to point out that, my nephew is Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican. He married a Mexican woman. Their children are 3/4, you could say, Latino. Their last name is Smith, so you can't, and many Latinos also in the census information, they consider themselves to be white, not Caucasian, but to be white. So you can't, I think that we're we're getting far out of what the Voter Rights Act, or maybe it was supposed to be to help more Democrats. I don't know. Maybe that's what it's for, instead of really helping people. But I know there's also, you know, African-American people that live in Pasco. Well, why don't they get their own commissioner district? You know, maybe there's only 10 of them. It doesn't matter because, you know, there are, so I guess you have to have the numbers, but I just think that it's worth fighting, because if you don't fight, okay, if you fight, you may lose, but if you don't fight, you'll never win. And that you're supposed to be representing the citizens, and we just want an honest, fair, and truth. That's all we're looking for. And if the other side, if the people win, then that's so be it. But at least we know what the truth is, and so I leave that with you.
Thank you. Keith, anybody on the phone?
No.
Anybody else for public comment? Hearing none. We are, is there any other business for the good of the county?
Commissioner, did you want to provide some direction to
For the redistricting board? Yeah, I think they should look at the districts that are currently myself. I'm speaking for myself as one commissioner, and I expect the others to say what they, I think that they should be looking at evening up the numbers. And I think there's some districts in East Pasco that could go into District 2 and well be within over 50% Latino. And even up the numbers. It's that simple. It wasn't that tough. I just wanted to really look at the map that we currently have and get us within the numbers. And I don't think we should be going into and conceding to district only. That is my biggest concern, is district only, because then I'm only going to represent the 3rd district. Why do I care what the 1st and 2nd districts say or need? Because I'm only representing the 3rd. I've always been told you represent the whole county. How do you represent the whole county when the whole county is not electing you? That's my question.
So my opinion is, and the constituents that have contacted me, is they are not for district only voting. I don't see where we've been in violation. I don't see where anybody that has won the primary has not gone forward and won the general. From the analysis that I've done, it looks like the numbers really don't change much from the primary to the general. I don't feel that we're racist, and I take that comment that came out in the Tri-City Herald very offensive, and I think it was a very poor job of reporting what actually took place, and has created nothing but more diversion throughout the community. With that said, I want to be as fair and equitable to everyone, and I don't believe that we haven't been, and so, you know, that's my 2 cents. Thank you for the time to express my opinion.
So I think it's a simple matter of we elected people who went to Olympia, they passed laws. We don't agree with all those laws. We're still duty bound to respect and follow them. And hopefully, if they're bad laws, in the process of doing that, we work ourselves crazy to change those laws. The county has already publicly taken a position in the summary judgment hearing that acknowledged that we, in fact, do have patterns of polarized voting, and that our current system, which none of us created, is currently in violation of the Washington Voting Rights Act. If we want to change that position with the court, then that's a matter for commissioners to consider and weigh individually. For myself, beyond complying with the current lawful requirements. I don't have any particular focus or intent or desire for how these boundaries come out. It's been suggested that have a personal interest, or the commissioners have a personal interest in where these boundaries are. I think at the end of the day, the people of Franklin County know each of us. You only have to watch a few meetings, and they will elect people that they trust. And I believe they'll elect people who honor their oath of office, respect the law, change it when the law is improper or imperfect. So I'm not frankly concerned about where the lines are drawn. And that's probably all I'm going to say at this point. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, just for trying to put together something that's concise for this redistricting committee, is there something in particular you would like us to propose as far as, would you like us to work with our demographer to present some options, at least for maps as a starting point to help the process roll? Clearly understanding that their input and the input that they gather from the community could change that. They could draw the lines, but I think we need to probably provide community members as well as the redistricting committee what the parameters are as far as the equal, as you mentioned, the equal populations, making sure that we're doing it in a way that gets us into compliance with the court. As we previously discussed, we have a deadline to turn in either our version of maps. The plaintiffs are certainly going to tender their version, their final versions by November 8th. We intend to do that as well with the interest. So that's some of the questions I have is, would the board like the committee to present to this board a couple different options? Would this board like options as far as I think we could draft up, 4 maps? Any more? Is there an option there with the possibility of
More than 4, it becomes very minute differences with specific precincts, and they're not going to change much. One of the starting places that we can do for a proposal to the Redistricting Commission is to start with the current districts and shift from there. That can be a starting place.
Yep.
So what we can do is we could prepare showing where our existing precincts are, where the existing districts are, and then where we are with the numbers. In other words, if we have to present a plan to the court that establishes that 50+% Latino threshold for one particular district, we could come up with, I think, with some options there so that they would be able to see some different ways to achieve that goal. If the board has any other direction, I'm willing to work with county administrator to help put that together in a resolution so that next week we could have that kind of nailed down.
So I don't have any objection to the concept of starting with where we are and adjusting that to bring it into compliance with the Voting Rights Act. Simultaneously, I'd like to see an effort from the other end of the spectrum where we start with a clean sheet and we draw a series of districts that we think most fully comply with the Voting Rights Act. Reason being are several fold, but among them are that when we bring it to the court, if we are minimally in compliance as opposed to fully in compliance, something that perhaps gets read at the time with the court and with the judge, but we want to be prepared to present both perspectives. And then a third option in the middle likely is an easy thing to do and probably should be done as a sort of a middle ground. Thanks.
I disagree. I don't think that we need to go with the second option of his. I think we start with the map and then we work around that map with different options. But if we show that we're willing to go to the full extent, then we're showing weakness.
So just for clarification, so we will show, we'll have the demographer prepare the existing map showing the existing precinct boundaries where they are, what the percentages are, and
With different options around that.
right. Do you want us to also provide any instruction as to what the requirement is to be able to show that we need to hit that 50% threshold?
Yeah, he's got that data.
And would you like us then to come up with using that demographer data, like the 4 options, like with the existing maps?
We need 4. I think 3 would be sufficient.
3 options?
I mean, I think convoluting it with 4. But this committee should have been meeting already with the census data that's been out how long?
Just since the middle of August. And
Yeah.
we were in the middle of trying to use that
It
census
was the
data
middle
to
of September,
respond
that's
to
a month.
and to use that. So is the board agreeable with presenting 3 different maps? Is that okay with the other members?
I'm fine so long as we bookend it with something in the middle.
It would be my recommendation that we protect the agricultural community of this county, which it was founded upon. My district obviously has the highest percentage right now. I feel that if there was any negotiating of the lines to make it more fair and equitable for everyone, I don't want to disenfranchise anybody in North Franklin County. And I feel to have true representation of the county as a whole, that the line should be adjusted to where the biggest district in city limits, maybe that should be the minority district. And I think that could be easily accomplished by taking some away from District 2 and adding into District 1. Therefore, you have 2 voices for the agricultural community and a fair representation of everyone that lives in the county. I'll have, part of the city of Pasco in my district, as will the North Franklin County District 3.
Chairman?
But I think those maps should be given to the redistricting committee and work with the demographer to make sure that we're fair and equitable to everyone that's involved.
So what I think would.
Mr. Stamp,
Oh,
before we
sorry.
go further, I'd like to speak to the same issue. I understand the longstanding desire to make sure that ag is fully represented, and I don't disagree with that, certainly. I want everybody in the county to be fairly represented. And the notion that someone from District 1 or 2 can't be an exceptionally fine commissioner in support of agriculture is a misnomer. There are lots of working farmers and former farmers. I think of members of our planning commission, Mr. McMullen, for example. They live in the city, but they're career farmers. So I think it's easy to overstate the idea that the only way you can represent ag is to live in that North District, or more homogeneous than that. And the other thing is that the state statutes call out what the requirements are for these districts, and that needs to be our first criteria, is to make sure that we comply with the existing state statutes for how districts are drawn. We don't gerrymander districts. We don't split them in 50-mile-long north-south districts and run the risk of disenfranchising agriculture by having 2 tall, skinny districts with a majority in the city in both, which is a real possibility when you try and do those things. So just stick to the law, use the criteria that are in the law, and be careful not to intentionally disenfranchise anybody.
As we're drafting up a resolution.
I would like to add that with my district, I also have the city of Colotus, which seems to be forgotten by most people. And all this attention is done on the city of Pasco. Also, the city of Connell is in my district. And I feel that those people need to be fairly represented. And so, along with the rural American way of life. And I don't feel that it should be dictated by the largest population center of Pasco controlling how we live in rural America.
Do you have a specific?
agree.
That's in your district. Do you have a specific suggestion of what you want our demographer to consider to consider those interests for Colotus and for Connell? Are you suggesting that those two communities should be in the same district if that's possible to construct that kind of map, or?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And don't forget about Mesa. It's in his district too.
And that's what I'm trying to understand is.
Misa's kind of split half and half, most of, yeah.
So that's a good question. Do you think that if Mesa is currently split, do you think that that's beneficial to keep City of Mesa, Connell, and Colotis in the same
Let's
district?
just say, I think it's beneficial to listen to Rocky's first statement. I think the majority minority should be in District 1, and District 2 and 3 should remain up the corridor with equal numbers. And if my district goes down into Commissioner Peck's, fine. But I think the majority minority should be in the city of Pasco, because that's where you have your best opportunity to make the numbers that they are requiring.
So with that, is one of the recommendations then to look, rather than that kind of at-large, all of North County in one, are you discussing a vertical line somehow to capture some of those communities into either or?
395, that's what we always use.
Okay.
So Mr. Sant, so long as we are still contemplating 3 maps as I described, I'm not opposed to looking at that option as well.
And I guess the other question is, for the committee, would this board like to have the committee propose their top 2 by unanimous vote? Would the board like just a simple majority vote of top 2 options for maps? How would you like the committee to report back to the board as far as their findings? As they have these public hearings, they're going to hear input and gather that input from probably even their own personal sphere of contacts and things like that. How would you like them to respond back to the board so the board has the best information?
I myself would like to hear from them personally in the room, presented.
Would you like then this resolution to include that we are giving direction? Keith, if you could pull up a calendar right now. We need to have, in order to make our proposal back to the court in a timely fashion, we're going to need to have probably a meeting on November 2nd by this body to hear that input. Is the board want to have any tighter timeline to where they have to have that information presented to this board maybe the week before that? And that way the board has a week from their presentation and this board's opportunity to gather input. Then on November 2nd, this board would then adopt either a couple options or one option. If the board thought that there's one map that seems consistent from the input, then we could put forward those 2 map options forward. I think, do you agree that we need 2 options to push forward to the court, or do you think having the one option, 2 options might give us some flexibility to get counsel on the plaintiff side to adopt ours if we have the good input and information there?
I would recommend 2 weeks prior to the deadline, having the redistricting committee present here as to their top choices and get an opinion from this body as to whether or not to present one or both or a different one, because this body will still have the authority to support or offer it to the plaintiff for settlement purposes.
I would like to see the top 3 choices that they bring forward.
Yes, 3.
So I'm happy with them bringing forward 3. All of those obviously need to be compliant with the statutes. I frankly would be happy to have them come and talk about why they drew those the way they did. I would prefer not to have numerical voting to weight 1, 2, and 3, because in the matter of small numbers math, 1 vote can tip the scales precipitously, and we ought not put excessive emphasis on that. If we have 3 lawful options, then it's ultimately this board's responsibility to choose which one is best for Franklin County. And I don't think that bringing them in a weighted fashion contributes to that. I think there ought to be 3 lawful options, and then we can discuss the merits, hear from the people that drew them as to why they drew them the way they did, and then we choose.
Given the nature of this and what I'm hearing is a fairly consistent request that all of the commissioners from the redistricting commission come in and give their thoughts and opinions. It might make sense to special set this issue on a single day. Special set this issue on a single day so that, because I anticipate significant public comment.
Well, I suggest that we schedule that to be a night meeting so we can have maximum participation.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because not everybody can be here during the day at this time. They work, they earn, they pay taxes.
And so based on the timelines that I have heard, we would ask them for them to make their recommendations back to this body by, I think it was October
19th, that's going to be, yeah, we'll have a budget hearings that last month.
And the plan would be for them to present their findings to this body, and then from that point, we'd have a night meeting the following week. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I was thinking they would present at a night meeting so that the public can see their presentation.
So, okay, so I guess I just, if the direction is for October 19th, that they are going to come make a recommendation, is that going to be the time that the board wants to take that vote? Because that's going to be at the same meeting, or does the board want a break between hearing those recommendations and actually taking?
I would like to hear the recommendations, hear from the public that want to attend, that knows the concerns and how important this is.
Yeah.
And then have a week to make the decision.
Keith, do you think you need anything else for us to put together this into resolution of what the direction is to this committee?
No, I'm a little nervous about the notice of the meetings and being able to conduct those in both English and Spanish. I haven't got time to do that, but we'll make it work.
And that might mean that they're going to have to meet hopefully a couple different times, maybe in the same week even, but okay. Commissioners, any other, Mr. Chairman?
Well,
Any other?
what happens if this committee comes and they're concerned about district-only voting?
Then they could share that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing that's etched in stone right now. That's not going to be able to be changed.
If there's a violation of the Voter Rights Act,
That's the only way.
the remedy is to go to district-only voting. And so unless the other challenges that have been referenced, the constitutional challenge that somehow makes the Voter Rights Act, the Washington Voter Rights Act invalid, where that is tossed out, the county's back in the same position we are today. I mean, even before litigation. So that's still preserved. We have to do this at the same time in case that does not succeed. We have to have a plan, because under the court's timeline, they are expecting the parties, the county, to submit its response to the court by November 8th. And so this will give the board enough time to make sure that we've got the information from the redistricting committee. They've provided that to the board, as well as for this board to have independent discussion at a public meeting and input as well.
Okay.
So
Any other comments, commissioners?
So just to sum up, then I will work with our demographers to come up with 3 different options consistent with the discussion today. They will present those maps as well as the existing map so that everybody knows where the current map is. And they're going to be free to also make deviations, suggestions, modifications, and report back to this board with 3. There are 3 options. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, is there any more? You said you had a caller on the phone?
She did not.
Okay, so is there any other business for the good of the board or the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.